watcher, and welcome along for the ride. Now then, listen up. If, like me, you're a big fan of matter transmission, that ultra-dark branch of physics that lets you do away entirely with your wheelbarrow, then you'll be well aware that it's a complete and utter bugger to get working properly. Matter transmission, that is, not your wheelbarrow. But take heart, it hasn't always been thus. And if our ancestors could do it 700 years ago, then we must simply persevere to rediscover the lost art. And today's matter transmission perseverance mission will take us along some slightly busier roads than usual to a rather peculiar village called Cherwell. If you're one of those people that are interested in such things, the name means roughly settlement by the Cherwell, which isn't too helpful until you realise that Cherwell in contemporary English translates to Cherwell, the name of a river here in the middle of England. An odd river at that, a very odd river indeed. There are dark strangenesses to be found in the waters of the river Cherwell, as we shall see. And the source of this slightly discomforting river Cherwell can be found just a mile or so west of here, in the bizarrely lumpy hills of Helidon. That sounds a bit elfin, doesn't it? And from there it wibbles about a bit to get to Cherwell, just up the road where we're heading, and then largely flows due south, which isn't common at all for English rivers, until it gets to the little metropolis called Oxford, which itself is not exactly urbanus normalis. It's one of those places where exceedingly clever people go to become even cleverer. One J.R.R. Tolkien being one such Englishman, completely mad of course, him and his Oxford pal C.S. Lewis, masters of fantasy both. And it's not for no reason that the river Cherwell was considered by Mr. Tolkien to be so oddly enchantingly magical that it became the inspiration for his river Withywindle in Middle-earth. Completely bloody mad. Anyway, from madness 'tis but a short step to genius, and whilst we leave the perhaps slightly otherworldly river Cherwell at Oxford, where incidentally it gets captured by and becomes the second largest tributary of the London-bound River Thames, we need to go back much closer to its source to discover the real transformational magic in those waters. For 'twas they that instigated one of the greatest known instances of matter transmission in ancient England. And it all happened just up ahead at Cherwell. Ah, here we go. Just round the corner. Think bike. Good plan. Just get out in front of the farmer. Welcome to Cherwell. Oh, what's that? Village yard sale. Nothing to do with a yard. I'll come back for that. There we go. I'm pulling down here for a quick drink, catch my breath, and we'll have a chat. Ooh. I told you there were some busier roads. Quite over there. Sheep worrying. Don't worry the sheep. They look like they've got enough to worry about. Right, here we are. But where are we anyway? Well, Cherwell sits right in the middle of England, on that, the main thoroughfare between the ancient market towns of Daventry and Banbury. Daventry a few miles up there to our right, which is north, and Banbury a few miles south down there to our left. Banbury being the same Banbury of the riding a cock horse and Banbury cross fame, and I'm pleased to be able to say that the cross is still there, still decorated on occasions. As for the horse and its cock, well, I'm unable to comment. And Cherwell, well, a river runs through it. The little Cherwell, of course, it's tucked away in here. Being a mischievous sort of a river, a veritable fluvial imp, it decides to change course right here at Cherwell and head due east, cutting right across the old trade route, and it can and does flood locally. Hopefully you can see it coming under the bridge there and heading off down to our left. It floods because this is England, a green and pleasant land allegedly, although not right now, we're in the middle of a drought. But if you were a trader in, say, the year 1400 or thereabouts, and you're trying to get your turnips from Daventry to Banbury, you wouldn't bother with a wheelbarrow, it's a bit too far, you'd have a pack horse. Or you'd wait 400 years ago, 400 years or so, for a slightly indirect canal option. But even a pack horse, at least a wise one, would look askance at a rather deep looking and healthily free flowing stream, maybe 15 feet across, particularly one that had a bit of a twinkle in its eye, and that'll be why some enterprising fellow decided to invest his hard-earned groats in the building of this bridge. Here it is, all its comical glory, the ancient Cherwell pack horse bridge, which I'll dart in the middle of the road. No risk spared, full risk assessment undertaken. Cherwell underneath. It must be said, I strongly suspect it's had fewer structural repairs than some of its replacements on this road. But what's going on here? What about that matter transmission stuff? Why don't we jump on the bike and pootle up here into the heart of the old part of the village, find its beating heart, which is of course as always the church, and work out, using elementary deduction of the kind they don't teach you down the road in Oxford, to determine the basics of matter transmission. And we'll try and do that without worrying any sheep. I'll tell you what, let's go over the bridge. I'm not too wide, only one horse at a time. I'll do the honourable thing and get on the road out of the way of these pedestrians. Hiya. A bit busier than it used to be. Ah, here we go, village. Church Street. That sounds promising. There we go. A bit more quiet and villagey, isn't it? old chapel or something, and a village hall. Got to have a village hall. The Chapel of the Good Shepherd. We must be down here. Although that looks like the older part back there. It's 40s or thereabouts. 50s over there. I'm talking previous century, of course. Where are we going? Ah. Well, we're on Church Street. Gatehead Road. Man got his old antique Ferguson tractor over there. Ah, we know what river that is. A little Cherwell. This is weird. But there's a track here for a reason. I'll tell you what though, it's a bit of a hike of a Sunday morning, heading off to Mass. This an old railway bridge. You have to love the Victorians. They've built them everywhere around here. Completely mad. Huge top hats. Engineers there. Yeah. Oh, hello. Cattle in field. Yep. Oh, here we go. They're so inquisitive, these fellas. Now you stay there and eat your grass and don't go running out. You get me in trouble. Yeah, that's locked. Ah, look at that. Did we say engineers? Fine British engineering. Oh, here we go. I've got a feeling they might follow me along here. Let's see where we get to. Oh, there's the old railway embankment. Oh. They're going to have a conversation about that. Right, back to the mission. What we're doing? Looking for church. There was some settlement here once. I don't know if you can see it, but there's ridges. Ancient furrowed agriculture. So there's been some people lived up this end. There's no houses or ruins. I don't know if you can see over there under those trees. Just see some ponds fed by the Cherwell. And can you see what I can see just past those trees? get round this side of this lovely old oak. I spy a church. It must be the best part of a mile from the village. There's the ponds, and we've got more furrows over here. And we see them a bit better in a minute. You can see them down there. And there's our lovely church. I'm just hiding round the corner. You always have a rectory. That's the only other building I can see, apart from a couple of farm sheds. I know there's a farm over that way. There probably is cows. Well, perhaps they weren't cows. This gate. That's the nettles. Oh. A fine gate. Years of life left in it. Right. Oh. The sheep are out. They're definitely not mingling with the cows today. Very brave little lambs. I'm not worrying you. Ah, look at that. I'll tell you what, if you were to be laid to rest, you could do a lot worse than this, couldn't you? Ah, man. What an amazing spot. Look it up in the dictionary under tranquil. Isn't that gorgeous? Just glorious. So, what do we know about this site of the village that was Cherwell, which is now referred to as Church Cherwell? Well, it's been populated for a while, as far back as the year 681. It was documented and named Cherwell. It appears under a slightly evolved name in the Domesday Book, and the oldest parts of the present church, the Church of the Holy Trinity, date back to around 1300, though as usual there was likely a predecessor place of worship on the site. The lands and the church manor house, which became the rectory, were granted to a local Cistercian abbey at the end of the 12th century, no doubt in return for eternal absolution and a guaranteed pass to heaven. England was Catholic then, of course, so divinity could be purchased, and the house remained the property of the abbey right through to the time of our wonderful King Henry VIII and his dissolution of the monasteries in 1538, when he ever so slightly sort of nicked all of their stuff. And from an aerial view we can see clear fossil topological evidence of a quite extensive lost settlement, agricultural earthworks as we notice on the way in, and fish ponds from medieval times fed by the Cherwell, and also overgrown outlines of what used to be the village right by the church. Let's have a quick look inside while we're here and see if we can pick up any clues as to what might have happened to trigger the astonishing matter transmission episode of an entire village, lock, stock and barrel, but minus church and manor house, almost a full mile to the west. It's a beautiful, peaceful place, oozing calm, so atmospheric, and a little history book all of its own. As I mentioned, parts of it, including some of the windows, date from 1300. Later parts are Gothic, The font is possibly 15th century, but is carved with emblems that suggest its origin as being during the reign of our magnificent Queen Elizabeth I. The present ring of 5 bells have variously been dated from 1510 to 1844, and the chancel was largely rebuilt at the start of the 20th century. But as is often the case in these village churches, one's eye is often drawn to the memorials, those of the wealthy past landowners and benefactors of sorts to the parish. And the Church of the Holy Trinity in Church Cherwell does not disappoint. We've seen this before. Followers of this channel, yes, both of you, will recall the Knightley family we visited at Fawsley when we cracked the secret of time travel. Well, here we have the Andrews family, commemorated with some fantastic monumental brasses and a carved tomb chest for Sir Thomas Andrews, who died in 1564, and his 2 successive wives. And like the Knightleys, the Andrews family line was a rich, powerful and well-connected dynasty. We mentioned Queen Elizabeth I. Well, it was one of the Andrews, as High Sheriff of Northamptonshire, who oversaw the execution of Elizabeth's cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, about 50 miles east of here, in the beautifully named Fotheringhay Castle in 1587. What a lovely name. If I was going to be executed, I'd like to be executed at a place called Fotheringhay, or maybe Bishop's Itchington, or Morton Pinkney. They're both quite near here. Perhaps, no, sorry, where was I? No. Mention of Fawsley and the Knightleys is relevant, as Fawsley is just a couple of miles away from Church Cherwell. Both families were sheep farmer barons. They were actually linked by at least one marriage, and both were comfortably in place in this area when English enclosure activity was underway, activity that enabled landowners to turf out the peasants, precisely what happened at Fawsley. So is that what happened at Cherwell? Something so, but I'm not falling for that. So land enclosure history in England is a messy subject. Understandably so, England being a nation run by duplicitous, crooked lawyers since the year dot, and it still is today. And crooked lawyers make no money at all when things are simple and clear-cut. So early on, villain barons simply imposed their will, purloining land and evicting people forcibly as early as the 12th century, according to some sources, though in later times local enclosure agreements were transacted between owners and resident farmer communities, for which read they were given a couple of farthings to bugger off. But it wasn't until much later that Parliament became fully engaged, such that from the years 1604 and right up to 1914, well over 5,000 enclosure bills were passed by Parliament covering about 1/5 of the land in England. 1/5! How busy those crooked lawyers were in the process of legalised theft. Not much has changed if you look at the current rogues gallery in that house of mischief, which of course sits on the bank of a river whose second principal tributary starts its life as the peculiar, whimsical stream we're interested in today. The mists begin to clear, perhaps. Now, in the case of Fawsley, the consensus is that the Knightleys shifted a small settlement to improve the outlook from Fawsley Hall, their home, and also to make room for more sheep on their estate, family owned right there on the site at Fawsley Hall a few yards from the church, which they did not own, which is why it's still there. However, the church manor house rectory at Church Cherwell, as we learnt, was owned by Cistercian monks until the dissolution of the monasteries in 1538, when ownership passed to the Crown. But it was recorded by local historian John Rouse in the year 1491, stick with me people, that Church Cherwell was already being significantly depopulated. Now the Andrews family had arrived in the area in about 1417, buying a small estate, and they subsequently also leased some land, so they didn't own everything they farmed, and would have had little interest in moving a village to shuffle sheep about or improve the view from their bedroom window, because they couldn't see what is now Church Cherwell as it was from their property at the time. And it wasn't until 1547 that records show they were into large-scale sheep farming with some 1,200 head of the little woolly chaps, and eventually purchasing the manor at Church Cherwell only in the year 1550, well over half a century after depopulation and migration was well underway. We know all about time travel, viewers, and those dates simply don't compute for an enclosure and eviction story to justify the issue here. It's a red herring. There are two other linked theories that attempt to explain the migration of the village, which, remember, would have been a massive undertaking at that time. Those agricultural earthwork relics are very extensive. We're not talking just a couple of homesteads, so there would have been substantial quantities of cut stone and great timbers being transported for reuse along a mile of rough track. One part of the theory is that the opening of the lovely little Packhorse Bridge meant that traffic and trade was diverted away from the Cherwell settlement site, and it gradually shifted of its own economic accord, drawn to where the action was, as it were. This migration, part two of the theory states, was hurried along by a little armed conflict. Now, the English are a friendly, peaceful bunch. No, honestly, we really are. But if there's a scrap to be had, then count us in. Now, the English Civil War raged around these parts of England, as we've learned elsewhere, in our mastering of the art of criminal lunacy. But it was the War of the Roses in the late 15th century that some claim left remote villages, ones just like Cherwell, vulnerable to looting and pillaging by marauding army units, pushing resident pastoral populations towards safer areas, where quicker escape from incoming danger was possible along better established transport links, particularly ones enhanced by better infrastructure such as newfangled bridges. All very well constructed arguments, of course, but utter nonsense. As an example of just one flaw in the argument, if you install infrastructure that makes it easier to get away quickly, you also made it easier for unwelcome others to get there more quickly in the first place. A simple glance at the evidence requires little analysis to arrive at the indisputable fact of the matter, which is this. Forget your sheep, forget the Andrews family, forget enclosure acts and the War of the Roses, and forget trade routes and Packhorse bridges. What we have is a church that once had a village around it, and that village is now about a mile away. The only enduring physical, evidential link between the two is a dark, fluvial, umbilical cord, a vibrant yet unpredictable energy source in the form of the River Cherwell, a waterway that rises at a strange spring in some very odd hills with a flummoxing name, travels in an unusual direction to arrive at Oxford, for some reason the geographical distillation, the essential home of the finest English literary fantasy, and not just your Tolkien's Hobbits and Lewis's Narnia. Before those pals were there, a certain Lewis Carroll was writing about Mad Hatters in Oxford, Oscar Wilde was writing of the Canterville and other ghosts along with his fairy tales, and Mr. Swift dreamed up his Gulliver's Travels down there. You might think this be coincidence. Why, Tish and Fay, sir. Tish and Fay. Now, if I were to mention that over the extensive period when those literary brains were Oxford resident, the primary source of drinking water in the city was a certain River Cherwell, which fed the main waterworks at a place called Folly Bridge. Well then, a stream known and understood by some of the most learned folk in the land to have more than just an air of the mystical mischief about it, must be placed in the dock, as it were, because the picture, like our very own Dorian Gray, now comes alive. There it sits, at Cherwell, this fledgling stream, smirkingly smug, wide-eyed and blinking in this little valley, playing the innocent martyr, tinkling quietly along as if asking in faux surprise, "Que moi?" "We submit that the defendant is guilty as charged, Your Honour. No further questions." And let me tell you, my dear friend, if ever you visit this part of the world, you might wander down and take a little look at the little River Cherwell, study it carefully, and try telling me with a straight face that you're not looking at liquid magical mischief on the move. It would seem that Mr. Tolkien was indeed a short step from madness, and in fact lived in the light of genius, perceiving immediately and with absolute clarity the sorcery of natural physics at work in his Withywindle. We all know that the power of water can move rock downstream, but who's to say that in the occasional dead of night a couple of stones here and a couple of oak beams there can't be quietly spirited upstream in the twirling of a moonlit, flukily naughty eddy, just for a lark, when no one, not even the worried sheep, are looking, just to amuse the water nymphs, just to get us falling Alice-like down rabbit holes in our flimsy detective work, as we are showered by plump plot red herrings that would make Agatha Christie blush. In her house at Winterbrook, a stone's throw from Oxford, right on the banks of the Thames, now swollen by its tributary, the Cherwell. A little uncanny. The bringing together of the Queen of Mystery with the masters of fantasy through the spirit of the waters, and Hercule and his spats would possibly have noticed slightly earlier than Jane and her hat, as I'm sure you have, dear viewer, that the River Cherwell took its name from the original name of Charwelton, which, as we have seen, was Cherwell, a simple anagram of Le Cuel. So beware. If you do go for a look, don't get too close would be my advice, and for God's sake don't drink from it. Heaven knows to whence your matter might be transmitted, and the experience may well leave you as lonely as Oscar in Reading Jail, or indeed as the Church of the Holy Trinity at Church Charwelton, whose softly sung lamentations of lonesome woe you can just about, but not quite, detect if you press your ear to its beautiful, lichen-encrusted ironstone walls. Thanks for watching. Go peacefully with an inner smile and a hobbit in your pocket. Hello, sorrow, you've come to call in my meadow where I'm feeling small. It's snowing now, only in my heart, wondering how we drift apart. They shaped my stones in ancient times for to lay their bones in a crypt to find. Prayers unsung by my font of rust, proud bells once rung, gather dust. I'm lonely, all by myself again. Can't bring a single friend to mind. I'm lonely, a hollow house of prayer, stuck in Lord knows where for all time. An island of grace with isles of passion, now out of place and out of fashion. Raindrops patter on my stained glass, nothing matters, time may pass. I'm a ghosted palace, a bygone prayer. My frozen chalice lies over there, where it's snowing now, only in my heart, wondering how we drift apart. I'm lonely, all by myself again. Can't bring a single friend to mind. I'm lonely, a hollow house of prayer, stuck in Lord knows where for all time.